The courtroom was quiet, almost unnaturally so, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and fills your chest with tension. The polished oak benches gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, reflecting the gravity of the day. Every person in the room, prosecutors, defense attorneys, court officers, journalists, felt it. A single moment could unravel everything. And that moment was about to arrive in the smallest, most unexpected form. 3-year-old Emma Parker clutched her pink stuffed bunny with white ears worn thin from constant hugging. Her small hands trembled slightly, but her wide, deep brown eyes betrayed a courage that belied her age. She wasn't here for any ordinary reason. She had witnessed something terrifying, something no adult had seen in time to stop. Today, the courtroom would witness her too. Emma's mother, Claire Parker, sat in the front row, shoulders hunched and knuckles white around the edge of her handbag. She had tried to shield Emma from the trauma, to keep the terror of that night buried. But when Emma was the only eyewitness to a home invasion that had left her father hospitalized and almost killed, the law had no choice. The system had to hear what she remembered. Across the room, the defense attorney fidgeted with his tie, his sharp black suit doing little to hide his unease. The prosecutor, a tall man with a precise, controlled demeanor, shuffled his notes, trying not to betray the hint of curiosity, maybe even dread, that Emma's presence inspired. Everyone knew this wasn't going to be a normal testimony. Then the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A pair of firm, measured footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. Emma, tiny and fragile, walked in hand with her mother. Her bunny bounced with each step. The murmurs of the gallery quieted immediately, replaced by a tension so thick it felt as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. And then she saw him. Titan, the German Shepherd Police K9, sat perfectly still beside his handler, Officer Hernandez. The dog's fur glinted under the lights, the muscles beneath coiled, alert, yet obedient. His dark eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on Emma, they softened slightly. It was as if he recognized a shared memory, a bond formed not through words but through survival and instinct. Emma froze for a second, clutching her bunny tighter, before taking a deep breath. Her mother whispered something under her breath, but Emma didn't reply. She didn't need to. Everyone's eyes were now locked on the small girl facing the dog who had, in his own way, been a guardian the night her world almost ended. The judge, a tall man with a commanding presence and lines etched deep into his forehead, leaned forward slightly. "Let the record show that the witness, Emma Parker, is present in the courtroom and accompanied by her mother," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Ms. Parker, you may step forward." The little girl hesitated, then slowly walked to the front of the courtroom, her bunny dangling at her side. Titan's ears twitched, and he sat up straighter, watching her every move. The silence was unbearable. Each step Emma took seemed measured, deliberate, though small hands often trembled with a mixture of fear and determination. The prosecutor stood. "Emma, do you remember the night your house was broken into?" His voice was gentle, almost coaxing. Emma nodded. "And do you remember who helped you that night?" She looked at Titan, then back at the prosecutor. Her lips parted slightly, and the courtroom leaned in, anticipating the answer from a 3-year-old who was about to do something extraordinary. "She remembers," Emma whispered. The courtroom froze. Titan's handler blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. The defense attorney's face paled. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge raised an eyebrow. "What did you say, Emma?" he asked softly, leaning closer. Emma stepped closer to Titan, her little feet moving with confidence that contradicted her size. She repeated slowly, "He remembers." The words carried an almost eerie weight, the kind of gravity that made adults catch their breath. The prosecutor knelt slightly to be at her level. "Emma, what do you mean he remembers?" Emma hesitated. Her small hands gripped the bunny tighter and her bottom lip quivered. "Titan," he saw the man before anyone else. He barked. He growled. "He kept me safe." A hush fell over the room. Titan's ears flicked forward, his nose twitching as if acknowledging her words. Emma's mother gasped softly, her hands trembling in her lap. This wasn't just a child's imagination. The dog had been there. He had seen what she had seen. The defense attorney jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor, this is preposterous. A child cannot testify to a dog's memory or intention." The judge raised his hand, silencing him instantly. "Overruled," he said, his voice firm. "Proceed, Ms. Parker. You may tell the court what you remember." Emma took a deep breath. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper but clear enough for the courtroom to hear, began describing the night that had turned her world upside down. She spoke of the masked man who had entered her home, the sudden darkness, the shattering noise of breaking glass. She spoke of the way Titan had barked, how he had guided her toward the corner under her parents' bedroom, how his presence had made her feel safe. As she spoke, Titan remained perfectly still, sitting tall but alert, his eyes never leaving her. The courtroom was spellbound. Every adult trained in law, logic, and procedure could feel the palpable connection between child and dog, a bond forged in fear, cemented in courage. Then came the words that sent chills through everyone. Emma, pointing her small finger at Titan, whispered, "He remembers the man." The courtroom erupted into a mixture of gasps and murmurs. The defendant, seated at the front, stiffened in his chair. His attorney paled, gripping the edge of the table. Titan's handler blinked rapidly, unsure of the dog's reaction. Titan's eyes locked on the defendant, alert, unblinking, a silent predator assessing the threat. The judge leaned back slightly, studying Emma carefully. "Explain, Emma. What do you mean by he remembers?" The girl's voice wavered but did not falter. "The dog, he saw the man. He knows him. He remembers the scary man who came in and hurt Daddy. He remembers what he smelled like, and he kept me safe." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The tension was so thick it was almost visible, wrapping itself around every person in the room. Emma's words carried an almost supernatural weight. A 3-year-old had described a memory, not of her own, but of a dog who had been her guardian that night. The prosecutor swallowed hard, the corner of his mouth twitching as he realized the magnitude of her statement. The defense attorney leaned forward, eyes wide, searching for any way to counter the truth radiating from the small child and the alert K9 before him. Titan shifted slightly, his muscles coiling, tail flicking in quiet tension. Emma's mother tried to hold back tears, gripping her handbag until her knuckles turned white. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing a story that would ripple across the nation. Cameras captured every detail, every micro-expression in this courtroom drama that had become both terrifying and miraculous. Emma took a step closer to Titan, whispering softly to him. The dog responded subtly, a tiny wag of his tail, a flick of his ears, an almost imperceptible nod. It was a silent conversation, one that everyone in the courtroom could feel even if they could not hear. Then came the 2 words that would set the courtroom on fire. Emma lifted her hand, pointing straight at Titan, and whispered, "He remembers." Silence fell again. Everyone in the courtroom knew in that instant that this case was no longer just about facts and evidence. It was about survival, memory, instinct, and the extraordinary bond between a child and the dog who had saved her life. The tension was unbearable. No one moved. No one breathed. And in that frozen moment, as cameras clicked and pens scratched, everyone realized that the smallest witness in the room had just flipped the courtroom upside down. The air seemed to hum with anticipation. The judge's gavel remained untouched. The defendant's eyes widened in disbelief. Titan sat rigid, every muscle alert, as if preparing for the next move that no one could predict. And Emma, small but unyielding, stared back at the dog who had kept her alive, knowing they were about to rewrite what testimony could mean. The courtroom held its collective breath, waiting for the next words, the next revelation, the next heart-stopping moment. The courtroom remained frozen, every eye on 3-year-old Emma Parker and the imposing German shepherd named Titan. The tension was palpable, like a thick fog pressing down on every person in the room. Every step, every whisper could change the course of the trial. No one dared move, not even the photographers and reporters, their pens hovering midair as if afraid to break the spell. Emma's mother, Claire, gripped her handbag tightly, knuckles white. She felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Her daughter was small, fragile, and yet the words she had just spoken, "He remembers," rippled through the room with a force stronger than any adult's testimony. The judge, a tall man with silvering hair and a measured demeanor, leaned forward. "Emma," he said gently, "can you tell the court what you mean when you say he remembers?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, as if he himself were bracing for something extraordinary. Emma took a deep breath, her little chest rising and falling like a fragile balloon in the storm. She looked at Titan and whispered, "Titan, he saw the man. He saw him first, before anyone else. He barked. He growled. He kept me safe." Titan's ears twitched at her words. His eyes, dark and deep, locked on her as though confirming everything she said. There was a solemn intelligence in that gaze, a silent acknowledgement that he remembered every moment of the terrifying night. The courtroom fell into a silence heavier than anything Emma had ever known. The prosecutor, a man named Richard Holden, leaned forward slightly, his voice soft but deliberate. "Emma, can you tell us exactly what Titan saw?" She nodded, hugging her pink bunny tightly. "The man, he wore a mask. He broke the glass. Titan barked first, and then he made me hide, under the bed. He stood in the hallway, and he didn't move until the man left." Her words trembled, but there was a clarity to them that made every adult in the room shiver. The defense attorney, John Miller, sprang to his feet, eyes wide. "Objection, Your Honor, this is preposterous. A 3-year-old cannot testify to a dog's memory. This is speculative and inadmissible." His voice trembled slightly, betraying the panic he felt. The judge raised a hand, silencing him immediately. "Overruled," he said. "Emma Parker may continue. The court will hear what the child remembers. Everyone else will remain calm." Emma's mother exhaled softly, trying to steady herself. She had feared this day for months, the possibility of facing the man who had invaded her home, the one who had hurt her husband, the one who had stolen their sense of safety. Now, it wasn't just her fear, it was her daughter's courage that filled the room. Emma's small voice rose slightly as she continued. He smelled funny. The man, he smelled like the man with the blue tie. Titan didn't like him." Every head in the courtroom snapped toward the defendant, who sat frozen in his chair, a blue tie now seeming like an ominous beacon. His hands gripped the table tightly, knuckles white. Titan's posture stiffened, his muscles coiled like springs ready to release. The dog's instincts were clear. Danger had been recognized and the intruder was present. The judge's voice broke the tension slightly. "Emma, do you remember what happened next?" "Yes," Emma said, stepping closer to Titan. She pointed at him, her tiny finger trembling but determined. "Titan made sure I was safe. He stayed in the hallway. He barked at the man, and he never left until it was okay." Titan lifted his head slightly at that moment, almost imperceptibly, a silent acknowledgement of her words. The gallery felt it too. This was no ordinary testimony. This was an extraordinary bond being witnessed by everyone in that room, a bond forged in terror and courage. The prosecutor leaned closer, his voice gentle. "Emma, do you remember anything else about the man? Something that could help us?" Emma nodded, her lips quivering. He had a scratch on his hand, right here." She raised her tiny hand, showing an imaginary mark, but the clarity of her memory made everyone lean in. "It hurt him, but he didn't stop. Titan saw it too. He growled at it." Titan growled softly, low in his throat, a sound that sent a shiver through the courtroom. The defendant's face drained of color. He suddenly became hyper-aware of every movement around him. His blue tie seemed almost symbolic now, a marker of guilt that Emma had somehow noticed even in the chaos of that night. The defense attorney, still reeling, tried to regain control. Your Honor, I insist that this testimony is unreliable. A 3-year-old cannot identify injuries or intentions. This is absurd. But the judge was unmoved. Order in the court. This testimony is being heard for what it is, an eyewitness account. All parties will remain silent unless addressed by the court. Emma's mother, fighting tears, whispered something to her daughter, but Emma barely acknowledged her. Her focus was Titan, who now stood up, muscles tense and eyes fixed on the defendant. The German Shepherd's growl had deepened, low and warning, echoing in the silent courtroom. Emma took another step forward, her voice rising with certainty. Titan remembered the man's face under the mask. He knew the man was dangerous. He wouldn't stop me from hiding. He waited. Gasps swept through the courtroom. The defendant's attorney suddenly realized that the dog was more than a symbol. He was a witness. A living, breathing witness who could corroborate the child's account with instinctive accuracy. The weight of the courtroom shifted. What had seemed like a surreal, almost storybook moment was becoming a real, tangible threat to the defendant. The prosecutor sensed the opening. Emma, did Titan do anything else that night? Emma nodded slowly. He stayed near me. He barked when the man moved closer. He stopped the man from finding me. Titan saved me. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Every reporter scribbled furiously. The judge's gavel remained untouched, his eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. Titan shifted slightly, his powerful body radiating focus, as if he were replaying every second of that night in his mind. Emma's mother could barely breathe. She had known her daughter was brave, but no one, not even her, had expected this. Her tiny girl was telling a story of instinct, courage, and memory that defied logic, and yet it was undeniable. Every word she spoke carried weight, and every movement Titan made confirmed her account. The defendant, realizing the walls were closing in, swallowed hard. His blue tie seemed to mock him. Titan's growl escalated, a low, rumbling warning that made everyone in the room hold their breath. Even the defense attorney had gone pale, realizing this trial had shifted from legal arguments to something far more primal: truth, instinct, and undeniable proof. The judge finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. Emma Parker, you may approach the defendant if you feel safe. Titan will accompany you. Emma paused, looking up at her mother, who nodded gently, reassuring her. Then, with the quiet courage of a child who had survived terror, she stepped closer. Titan followed, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the man who had caused so much fear. Every step she took felt monumental. Every eye in the courtroom followed. She stopped just a few feet from the defendant and pointed at him. He remembers you. He knows you hurt Daddy. The room went silent again. Titan growled softly, a subtle but undeniable warning. The defendant's face was pale, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he realized that the smallest witness in the courtroom, the 3-year-old girl and the dog who had protected her, was about to unravel everything he had done. The prosecutor took a step forward, whispering to the judge, who nodded. Cameras clicked and flashed, capturing every moment of this unprecedented courtroom drama. Emma, clutching her bunny, whispered again, "He remembers everything." And in that chilling moment, every person in the courtroom understood. The trial had changed. The rules of evidence, the arguments, the legal strategies, all of it now hinged on the bond between a child and a dog who refused to forget. The suspense was suffocating, the tension almost unbearable, and yet the truth had never been more clear. Titan's growl grew louder. The defendant's knees trembled, and Emma, small but fearless, stared directly at the man who had terrorized her family, whispering words that would echo far beyond that courtroom. He remembers. The tension in the courtroom was so thick it felt almost physical, pressing down on every person present. Every eye remained locked on Emma Parker and Titan, the German Shepherd whose presence had transformed a normal legal proceeding into something far more extraordinary. Emma's small frame trembled slightly, but her resolve was unwavering. She had survived that night once, and now she was facing the man who had caused her world to shatter. Titan, coiled and alert, mirrored her intensity. His ears flicked, muscles tensed, and his eyes never left the defendant. Every instinct in the dog's body screamed the same warning. Danger was present, and this man was the source of it. Even the court reporters who had covered countless high-profile trials felt a shiver run through them. Emma's mother, Claire, gripped her handbag so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her gaze flicked between her daughter and the defendant, whose face had turned as pale as the polished courtroom floor. The blue tie he wore, once ordinary, now an ominous signal, seemed to mock him in the harsh fluorescent light. The judge leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Emma, can you tell the court what happened after Titan saw the man?" Emma swallowed hard, taking a deep breath, and began in her small, clear voice. "He moved fast. The man moved into the hallway. Titan barked. Then he made me hide under the bed. I stayed very quiet. Titan stayed in the doorway." She pointed again at the dog, emphasizing the precision of his actions. "He remembered what the man did before, and he knew he had to protect me." The courtroom was silent, everyone hanging on her every word. Titan shifted slightly, low growl rumbling from his chest, as if punctuating her story. The defendant's hands twitched, almost imperceptibly, as though the dog's growl had reached into his very nerves. He was sweating despite the controlled air conditioning, his breath coming in shallow, panicked bursts. The prosecutor, Richard Holden, leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "Emma, do you remember anything else the dog did? Something that could help us understand what the man looked like?" Emma nodded. "Yes, Titan barked and growled when the man moved closer. I saw his hand. It had a scratch, a red mark. He tried to hide it, but Titan knew." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The defense attorney, John Miller, jumped to his feet, desperation in his voice. "Your Honor, this is sheer fantasy. A child cannot identify an injury on an adult. This testimony is entirely inadmissible." The judge raised a hand, cutting him off instantly. "Overruled. Emma Parker's account is a direct eyewitness report. The court recognizes her unique role in the events of that night. She may continue." Emma's mother let out a shaky breath but remained silent, letting her daughter continue. Emma took another step forward, her small hand trembling slightly but pointing with unflinching certainty at the defendant. Titan remembered his face under the mask. He remembered his voice. He barked when he heard him move. He stayed in front of me. He made sure I was safe. Titan lifted his head at her words, eyes narrowing, teeth barely visible beneath his lips. Every muscle in his body was taut, ready to act if the defendant tried anything. The prosecutor glanced at the judge, who simply nodded. The courtroom was a powder keg, and no one dared move. Emma's small voice rose again. "He wore a mask, but Titan could tell something was wrong. He growled when the man stepped into the room. He sniffed the air, and he knew the man smelled like danger." Titan growled louder now, a low, rumbling warning that reverberated through the polished walls. The defendant's blue tie seemed to tighten around him, a symbol of the panic spreading through his mind. Sweat dripped down his temple as his eyes darted from Titan to Emma. He realized the courtroom had shifted. This was no longer just a trial. This was a reckoning. The defense attorney sputtered, words catching in his throat. "Objection! Your Honor, this is ridiculous. A dog's instincts cannot constitute evidence in a court of law." The judge's gaze was unwavering. "Order in the court. The objection is overruled. The witness may continue." Emma took a deep breath, hugging her bunny closer, then whispered. Titan even remembered the man's smell. He knew he was dangerous before anyone else. He growled at him, even when no one else saw. The courtroom leaned forward in unison. The reporters scribbled frantically, cameras clicked, and murmurs rippled through the room. Titan's growl deepened, a resonant warning that seemed to vibrate in the air itself. Every adult in the courtroom realized at that moment that the dog's instincts were not only valid, they were terrifyingly accurate. The prosecutor saw an opening. "Emma, do you remember anything else about the man? Anything that could help us understand what he was planning?" Emma hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Titan as if seeking reassurance. The dog's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. She nodded. "Yes, he wanted to find me. He wanted me. He came into the house, but Titan stopped him. He didn't let him reach me." A hush fell over the courtroom. The weight of her words, delivered by a 3-year-old, settled like a stone. Titan shifted, low growl vibrating through his chest, muscles taut as if ready to pounce. The defendant's jaw tightened, his knuckles turning white on the table. The blue tie, once innocuous, seemed to mark him as guilty before a single word was spoken. Emma stepped closer, her tiny finger pointing firmly at the man. "He remembered him. Titan remembered him. He didn't forget. He protected me." Titan rose slightly on his haunches, a silent guardian, a living, breathing sentinel. His eyes never left the defendant, and the growl that escaped his throat made the defendant flinch visibly. Every officer in the room tightened their stance, ready for the dog to act. Emma's mother tried to intervene, whispering softly to her daughter, but Emma shook her head. She didn't need comfort. She needed to speak, and Titan needed to protect. The prosecutor leaned in again. "Emma, do you remember what Titan did when the man moved closer?" Emma nodded, her eyes wide and unwavering. "He barked. He growled. He stood in the hallway. He made sure I was safe, and then he didn't move until the man left." The defendant shifted in his seat, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He knew with an almost primal certainty that the dog could identify him, that the dog remembered him, that the smallest witness in the room had just sentenced him in ways the law could not yet fully comprehend. The judge leaned forward, voice calm but commanding. "Emma Parker, can you tell the court if Titan ever left your side that night?" "No," Emma whispered. "He stayed, he never left, he remembered everything." The courtroom was silent, every adult feeling the gravity of her words. Titan growled once more, low and steady, a warning that seemed to echo in everyone's bones. The defendant's face was pale, his body tense, as if the dog's memory alone had already judged him. Emma took a small step closer to the defendant, her voice barely above a whisper. "He remembers everything the man did. He knows the man is dangerous." The prosecutor exhaled softly, realizing that this child's testimony, paired with Titan's instinctive behavior, was about to become the cornerstone of the case. Every adult in the room understood the implication. This was no ordinary trial. This was a story of courage, instinct, and memory, the combined forces of a child and a dog who had survived terror. Titan's growl grew louder, a rumble that vibrated through the polished floor, the wooden benches, and the hearts of everyone present. The defendant's knees trembled. His blue tie, the symbol of his presence that night, now seemed to strangle him. Sweat ran down his face, his eyes darting nervously to the exits, to the judge, to Titan, to Emma. The judge's gavel remained untouched, but the room was electric with tension. Every person understood. The courtroom had changed. The rules of evidence, of logic, of strategy, all of it now hinged on the bond between a 3-year-old girl and the dog who had protected her. Emma whispered again, barely audible, but every person in the room leaned in. "He remembers." Titan's eyes narrowed, his muscles coiled like springs. The defendant swallowed hard, realizing that nothing he could say or do would undo what the dog and the child had already accomplished. Every breath he took seemed to echo in the silent courtroom, every second stretching into eternity. And in that moment, everyone knew. The trial was no longer about words on paper or legal arguments. It was about survival, instinct, courage, and the extraordinary bond between a child and the dog who refused to forget. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for the next revelation from the smallest witness in the room and the dog who had remembered everything. The suspense was unbearable, the tension almost suffocating, and yet the truth had never been clearer. The courtroom hung in a frozen state, every eye fixed on 3-year-old Emma Parker and the German shepherd named Titan. The child's tiny frame exuded a courage that belied her age, while the dog radiated a lethal calm, muscles coiled and eyes focused on the man who had invaded their lives. A single misstep could ignite chaos, and everyone felt it. The defendant, his face pale and sweat beading on his temples, shifted nervously in his chair. His blue tie, once ordinary, now seemed like a marker of guilt, a banner of impending justice. He glanced at Titan, a chill rippling through his body as the dog's unwavering gaze pinned him like prey. The judge leaned forward, voice steady, but carrying authority that resonated through the silent room. "Emma Parker, please tell the court what Titan did after the man entered your home that night." Emma's small lips trembled slightly, but her voice was clear. "He barked at him. He growled. Then he ran down the hallway to make sure the man didn't get close to me. He made me hide under the bed. He stayed there until it was safe." Titan shifted slightly, the low rumble of a growl vibrating from his chest. Every adult in the courtroom felt it as a tangible warning, like a pulse of electricity in the air. The defendant's knuckles whitened as he gripped the table. He realized with a cold terror that the dog's memory, and the child's recollection, was slowly closing in on him. The prosecutor leaned forward, carefully measuring his words. "Emma, did Titan do anything else that night? Anything you remember that could help us understand what the man looked like or what he intended?" Emma paused, looking up at Titan for reassurance. The dog's ears twitched, eyes locking on her, silent encouragement in every flicker of muscle. "Yes," she said softly. "He sniffed the air. He growled when the man moved closer. I saw the man's hand, it had a scratch. Titan knew it hurt him, but he didn't stop. He was scary, but Titan stayed." A wave of gasps swept through the courtroom. The defendant's face drained of color, sweat running down his jawline. Titan growled again, low and warning, the sound vibrating through the wooden floor and echoing in the walls. Even the defense attorney, who had tried to maintain composure, now seemed pale and unsteady. The judge's voice cut through the tension. "Order in the court. The witness may continue. The court recognizes the unusual circumstances, but the testimony is to be heard in full." Emma swallowed hard, hugging her pink bunny closer. Her voice trembled slightly but carried clarity that stunned everyone. Titan remembered the man's face under the mask. He growled when the man moved. He stayed in front of me. He made sure I was safe. Titan rose slightly, coiling his muscles like a spring, teeth bared just enough to show his warning. The defendant's knees shook. Every second stretched as the courtroom absorbed the full weight of Emma's words and the dog's silent confirmation. The air felt electric, charged with anticipation and fear. The prosecutor recognized the opportunity. "Emma, did Titan do anything when the man tried to move towards you?" Emma nodded, eyes wide, voice firm. "He barked, he growled, he stepped forward, he stopped him." The courtroom erupted with whispers. The defendant's body tensed, and he realized with a creeping panic that Titan had witnessed everything and remembered. The dog's instincts were undeniable, and in that room they were proof. The man's blue tie seemed to suffocate him now, a symbol of his guilt as Titan's growls intensified. Suddenly, Emma pointed at Titan and said, "He remembered the man smelled like danger. He remembered everything." Titan growled louder, the sound low, resonant, and terrifying. The defendant flinched. He could no longer deny what the child was saying or what the dog was showing with every muscle, every tense motion. This wasn't imagination. It wasn't exaggeration. This was instinct, memory, and truth in living form. The judge's gavel remained untouched. He was calm, but even he seemed aware that the courtroom was perched on a knife's edge. Every adult understood. The testimony of a child and the instinct of a dog had shifted the balance of power. The defendant was cornered, and everyone knew it. Emma took another step forward, small but deliberate. Titan remembered the man's voice. He barked when he heard him. He knew the man was dangerous before anyone else did. Titan growled again, louder, closer, his eyes fixed on the defendant as though calculating the exact moment to act. Officers at the front of the courtroom shifted slightly, hands hovering near holsters, ready for the dog's next move. The defendant's face went pale. His blue tie seemed to tighten around his neck, constricting him with the weight of his own guilt. The prosecutor asked softly, carefully, "Emma, did Titan ever leave your side that night?" "No," she whispered. "He stayed. He remembered everything. He protected me." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The air was heavy with tension, anticipation, and awe. Emma's tiny voice carried more weight than any argument or legal precedent. The child and the dog had become a unit of truth, a force that could not be denied. Titan's growl deepened, a warning that reverberated through the room. The defendant shifted nervously, realizing that his fate was being sealed by instincts he could neither control nor counter. His blue tie mocked him, a symbol of his exposure. Sweat beaded along his forehead as he glanced toward the exits, considering escape, but Titan's watchful eyes made it clear there would be no easy path out. The defense attorney stammered, trying desperately to regain control. "Your Honor, this is unprecedented. A dog's behavior cannot be considered evidence." The judge's calm voice cut through, sharp and authoritative. "Order in the court. The objection is overruled. The witness may continue." Emma, emboldened by Titan's presence, spoke again. He remembered the man. Titan remembered the scratches on his hand, the mask, and the smell. He didn't forget. He never forgets. Titan shifted slightly, low growl vibrating through the polished floor, muscles ready to spring. The defendant's hands gripped the table tightly. Every second stretched into eternity as the tension in the room became almost unbearable. The prosecutor, recognizing the opportunity, leaned forward. "Emma, did Titan remember where the man went after leaving your home?" Emma nodded. "Yes, he followed the smell. He knew the man would try to come back. He remembered every step. He made sure I stayed safe." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The defendant's jaw tightened. He realized with a cold certainty that the child and the dog had observed him in ways no human witness could. The courtroom was no longer just a place for testimony. It had become a stage for instinct, memory, and courage. Titan's growl rose, a low, resonant warning that made every person in the room flinch. Emma's mother fought back tears, proud and terrified of the bravery her daughter displayed. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicking, documenting every movement, every glance, every growl. The judge finally broke the tension. "Emma Parker, Titan's actions are clearly significant. Your testimony will be considered in full." The court recognizes the dog's instincts as extraordinary and relevant to these proceedings. Emma's tiny hand still pointed at Titan. "He remembered everything," she whispered, voice trembling but unwavering. Titan shifted again, muscles tense, eyes locked on the defendant. The man's body trembled. His blue tie, a symbol of his guilt, seemed to strangle him as he realized the courtroom had become a cage, and he was inside with no escape. The prosecutor took a step closer to the judge. "Your Honor, if I may, Titan's instincts corroborate Emma's testimony. This is beyond reasonable doubt. The child and the dog provide evidence that cannot be ignored." The judge nodded, solemnly. "Proceed as you see fit, Mr. Holden, but the court will remain vigilant for the safety of all involved." Emma's mother clutched her hands together, trying to steady herself. Titan pressed a massive head against Emma's tiny shoulder, a silent reassurance. Emma whispered softly to the dog, "You remembered, thank you." Titan responded with a subtle wag of his tail, eyes never leaving the defendant. Every person in the courtroom felt the weight of this silent exchange. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. The defendant was cornered, the courtroom was tense, and the child and her dog had become an unstoppable force of truth. The judge finally leaned back, eyes flicking between the defendant, Titan, and Emma. This court will now proceed with further questioning, but let it be known that the actions of this child and this dog are extraordinary and will be treated with the gravity they deserve." The courtroom held its breath, waiting for the next revelation, the next move, the next action that could unravel everything. Titan growled again, low and deliberate, and the defendant's body went rigid. Every adult in the room understood. The trial had shifted from law and argument to instinct, memory, and courage, and nothing would ever be the same. And in that moment, the courtroom knew with unshakable clarity. The smallest witness and the dog who remembered everything had become the center of a drama no one would ever forget. The courtroom had become a pressure cooker, every adult on edge, every heartbeat amplified. Titan's growl rumbled like distant thunder, vibrating through the polished floor. Emma Parker, clutching her pink bunny, stared at the man who had invaded her home, her tiny finger still pointing with unwavering certainty. The defendant, pale and trembling, realized the walls of the courtroom had closed in around him. He could feel the weight of judgment pressing down, not from the law alone, but from instinct, memory, and the bravery of a 3-year-old child. The defendant's eyes darted around frantically. Officers were stationed at every entrance, but in his mind, every exit seemed too far, every door a threat, every moment a countdown. Titan's growl escalated, a deep, resonant sound that made even the most composed adults flinch. The dog's muscles coiled, his every movement deliberate and predatory. The man's panic was palpable. He could no longer deny what he had done, and he could no longer ignore the dog's presence. Emma's mother, Claire, gripped the edge of the bench. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had seen courage before, but nothing like this. Her daughter was a beacon of fearlessness, and Titan, a living shield, mirrored and amplified her strength. Claire whispered softly, "Be careful, Emma," but her voice trembled with a mixture of fear and awe. The defendant rose slightly in his chair, shaking, eyes darting toward the rear exit. I didn't do it," he stammered, but his voice cracked under the weight of his own panic. The courtroom fell silent, every ear straining to hear the truth in his words or the lies. Titan's growl deepened, vibrating through the air like a warning bell. The German shepherd shifted forward, coiled and ready, eyes fixed unwaveringly on the man. The defendant froze, realizing that Titan had not just remembered that night. He had calculated the threat, and instinctively he was ready to act. The defense attorney, John Miller, leapt to his feet, voice urgent and desperate. "Your Honor, my client is not dangerous. The dog cannot dictate proceedings." The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Order. The courtroom will remain calm. Officers, be ready, but no one may interfere unless directed." Emma, sensing the rising tension, stepped slightly forward. Titan, he knows, he remembers. He won't let him escape. Her voice, small yet firm, carried through the courtroom like a proclamation. Suddenly, the defendant bolted. The blue tie around his neck flailed as he lunged toward the back exit, sending his chair clattering across the polished floor. Gasps erupted, and the courtroom descended into chaos. Spectators shouted, cameras clicked frantically, and officers sprang into action. Titan, trained for moments like this, reacted instantly. His handler, Officer Hernandez, had released him to move freely. The German shepherd launched forward with explosive speed, muscles rippling as he closed the distance. Emma froze, gripping her bunny, but Titan's eyes remained on her, a silent command that she stay safe. The defendant barreled past desks, scattering papers and knocking over a chair. Titan accelerated, teeth bared in a controlled snarl, aiming for precise interception, not harm. The courtroom was a blur of movement, reporters diving for cover, officers shouting commands, and spectators frozen in a mixture of fear and awe. Emma's mother screamed, "Emma, stay!" But the little girl remained rooted, watching Titan, whose instincts were flawless, his loyalty absolute. Titan closed in, calculating the man's trajectory, anticipating his every move. With the precision of a trained predator, Titan intercepted the defendant just steps from the exit. The man stumbled, tripping over a fallen chair, and Titan's powerful body slammed against him, pinning him to the floor. Officers surged forward, restraining him, but Titan remained in control, ensuring no sudden movement could harm the child who had borne witness. The defendant struggled, thrashing violently, eyes wide with terror. Titan's growl deepened, warning him to stay still. The German shepherd's weight and presence alone immobilized the man, and the officers quickly cuffed him. Titan remained alert, eyes scanning the room, muscles taut, until the threat was fully contained. Emma, trembling but safe, ran to Titan, burying her face in his thick fur. She whispered softly, "Thank you for remembering." Titan lowered his massive head, nuzzling her gently, a living shield and companion who had kept her alive. The courtroom watched, spellbound by the extraordinary bond between child and dog. Officers secured the defendant and began collecting evidence from his belongings. A folded envelope slipped from his jacket pocket, landing on the floor with a soft thud. An officer picked it up, revealing a small silver necklace engraved with the initials EP, Emma's necklace. Her mother gasped, tears streaming down her face. The prosecutor knelt beside Emma, his voice calm but urgent. "Emma, do you know why he had this?" Emma shook her head, wide-eyed, clutching Titan's fur. He said he'd come back for me," she whispered. The courtroom froze again, a collective chill spreading like a shadow. Officers emptied the defendant's pockets, uncovering a burner phone, cash, gloves, and a folded sheet with addresses, all marked under the ominous heading, "Loose Ends." At the top, Emma's name was circled in red. The implications were staggering. The man had not only invaded their home, he had been planning something further. The danger had not ended that night. The judge called for a brief recess to ensure the courtroom's safety. Officers escorted the defendant out, but Titan remained alert, guarding Emma with a presence that radiated reassurance and warning simultaneously. Reporters scribbled furiously, aware that this story would become national news. A 3-year-old girl, a German shepherd, and a thwarted criminal who underestimated both. Emma's mother wrapped her arms around her daughter, shaking, whispering reassurances that barely contained her own terror. "You're safe now. You're safe." Emma, still clutching her bunny, looked up at Titan. "He remembered everything, didn't he?" she whispered. Titan responded with a gentle nuzzle, as if affirming her words. The room seemed to exhale collectively, the tension momentarily dissipating, but the knowledge of what had transpired lingering like a storm cloud. The prosecutor examined the evidence, realizing the full scope of the case. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady but heavy with gravity, "the items found on the defendant indicate clear intent. The child and the dog's testimony, combined with this evidence, makes it undeniable that he posed a real threat." The defense attorney slumped into his chair, defeated, knowing there was no argument left that could counteract the extraordinary combination of instinct, courage, and evidence before him. The defendant's attempt at escape had sealed his fate in the eyes of everyone present. Titan, still standing guard, occasionally glanced at Emma, a silent reassurance that she was safe. His presence was more than physical, it was symbolic, a living testament to vigilance, loyalty, and the ability to remember the smallest details that saved lives. As the courtroom slowly regained order, the judge addressed everyone. "This court has witnessed extraordinary bravery today. The testimony of Emma Parker, corroborated by the actions of Titan, the K-9 officer, has demonstrated the reality of the threat posed. Proceedings will continue, but let it be known that the courage and instinct displayed today will be taken fully into account." Emma hugged her mother tightly, then glanced at Titan, whispering again, "You remembered. You saved me." Titan's eyes softened briefly, his massive head lowering as he allowed her a moment of comfort before resuming his watchful stance. Reporters filed the story immediately. Cameras flashed. The narrative was clear. A 3-year-old child and a police dog had faced terror and emerged victorious. But for those in the courtroom, the tension lingered. The defendant's plans had been exposed, but the shadow of danger had only just been revealed. Titan's instincts had saved a life, but the question hung in the air. How many others might have been next? The judge called for a brief pause before continuing with the testimony of other witnesses. Emma's words, Titan's growls, and the defendant's failed escape would resonate through the court, a chilling reminder of how bravery, instinct, and memory could converge to save a child's life. And as the courtroom settled, the silent understanding was unmistakable. The smallest witness and the dog who remembered everything had rewritten the rules of engagement that day. The defendant had underestimated them both, and that mistake had nearly cost him freedom, if not more. The courtroom had barely caught its collective breath after the defendant's failed escape, and yet the tension remained thick, lingering like smoke in the air. Emma Parker, her pink bunny still clutched tightly, sat close to her mother, eyes wide but determined. Titan, alert and imposing, had resumed his silent watch beside her, every muscle coiled, every sense attuned to the lingering danger. The courtroom understood something they hadn't realized before. This trial had become more than legal proceedings. It was a living, breathing drama of courage, memory, and instinct. The prosecutor, Richard Holden, approached the bench with the evidence collected from the defendant's jacket. The folded sheet of addresses, the burner phone, and the silver necklace engraved with Emma's initials now dominated attention. Gasps filled the courtroom as the items were displayed. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicking, capturing every detail. The man who had attempted to flee was now cornered not only by law but by his own recklessness. The judge, a figure of calm authority, leaned forward. "Mr. Holden, please explain the relevance of these items to the court." Richard's voice was steady, but the weight of the moment was undeniable. "Your Honor, the items found on the defendant indicate premeditation and intent. The silver necklace belongs to Emma Parker, the child who witnessed the break-in. The addresses and notes indicate that he had planned to return, perhaps to harm her or others connected to her family. This was not a random act. It was calculated, and he intended to continue." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The reality of the situation struck every person present. The defendant had not only violated their home, but had actively prepared for further harm. The 3-year-old witness who had survived that night, with the silent aid of Titan, was now the linchpin in exposing the full scope of his plan. The defense attorney, John Miller, leaned forward, voice strained. "Your Honor, I object. This evidence may have been obtained after the defendant attempted to flee, and the child's testimony regarding the dog's instincts." The judge raised a hand, cutting him off. "Order. Objection noted but overruled. The evidence is relevant to establishing intent, and the court recognizes the extraordinary role of the witness and the K-9. Proceed, Mr. Holden." Emma watched Titan closely, her small hand brushing against his thick fur. She whispered softly, "He remembered everything." The dog's gaze softened briefly at her words, but his body remained tense, alert. Everyone in the courtroom felt the intensity of that bond, a child and a dog who had survived terror, whose courage and instincts now exposed a would-be criminal. Richard continued. The burner phone contained messages detailing locations and intended victims, one of which was Emma herself. The folded sheet shows that the defendant had targeted multiple homes, planning to strike again. Without the intervention of Titan, who remembered his actions and protected Emma, the consequences could have been catastrophic. Gasps and murmurs spread through the courtroom. The defense attorney paled. His objections now seemed meaningless against the tangible evidence and the vivid testimony of a child and a dog whose actions had altered the course of events. The judge's gaze swept the room. "This court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances. Emma Parker, your testimony and Titan's actions are central to understanding the defendant's intent. The court will now hear further details from this witness." Emma's mother reached down, holding her hand tightly. "Emma, do you remember anything else?" she whispered. Emma nodded. Her voice was soft but steady. Yes, Titan remembered the man's smells, the scratches on his hand, and the way he moved. He remembered every detail so he could protect me. He even followed the man when he left to make sure I was safe. Titan responded to her words with a subtle movement, a shift forward, muscles taut, eyes unblinking. The courtroom felt the weight of his vigilance. The defendant's terror was almost palpable. He could see what Emma and Titan had witnessed, and he realized there was no hiding from the truth. The prosecutor turned toward Titan. "Officer Hernandez, can you explain how Titan's behavior corroborates the child's testimony?" Officer Hernandez nodded. "Yes, sir. Titan's training is extensive, but it is his instincts that made the difference. He recognized the threat before any adult did, protected the child, and reacted decisively to prevent harm. His memory and awareness are part of what we call K-9 witness reliability. In this case, his actions and Emma's account perfectly align, confirming the defendant's intentions." A murmur of astonishment passed through the courtroom. Titan wasn't just a witness. He was an active participant in the prevention of further crime. His instincts had been precise, lethal if necessary, and wholly protective. The defendant's hands twitched nervously as he shifted in his chair. His lawyer's protests had fallen flat. The evidence was overwhelming. Every adult in the courtroom understood that the child and the dog had not only survived a terrifying ordeal, but had also exposed the defendant's criminal intentions with near irrefutable clarity. Emma's gaze remained fixed on Titan. He remembered everything: the mask, the scratches, the smell, and the way the man moved. "He kept me safe." Her voice, though small, carried authority. Every adult leaned forward, absorbing the power of her words. The judge nodded. "The court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances and the role of the K-9 in safeguarding the witness. This will be considered as part of the official record." The prosecutor then carefully presented the items recovered from the defendant's belongings. Each one told a story of premeditation, of malevolent intent, and of plans that had been thwarted by the smallest witness and the most loyal guardian. The necklace, the addresses, the messages. They painted a portrait of a man who had underestimated both courage and instinct. Emma's mother could hardly breathe. She had worried endlessly about her daughter's safety, but now she realized that her daughter had been part of something extraordinary, a story that would inspire awe and, perhaps, fear in others who underestimated the bravery of a child and the instincts of a trained K-9. The defendant's face went pale as each piece of evidence was laid out, each item reinforcing the child's testimony. Titan's eyes never left him, a living reminder that the dog remembered every action, every threat, every potential harm that the man had intended. The courtroom was silent with anticipation, every person waiting to see how far this extraordinary bond of child and dog would expose the defendant's criminal intentions. Emma's small voice rose again. "He remembered where he went, what he wanted to do next, and he didn't forget. He kept me safe the whole time." Titan responded with a low, warning growl. The courtroom flinched collectively. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, impressed by the K-9's behavior. Every officer present nodded in quiet approval. Titan's instincts, validated by the child's precise recollection, had confirmed the threat and protected the most vulnerable witness in the room. The prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the items recovered, combined with Titan's actions and Emma's testimony, establish intent and corroborate the threat posed by the defendant. This is not only evidence of past crime but proof that he was planning future acts of violence." The judge exhaled, his expression somber but resolute. "The court will proceed with full recognition of the testimony and actions observed today. The bravery of the witness and the K-9 officer will remain a central consideration in all further proceedings." Emma looked at Titan, her small hand brushing his thick fur. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. "You remembered and saved me." Titan pressed his massive head against hers, a silent affirmation that every detail, every instinct, every protective action had been precise and correct. The courtroom remained tense, the air thick with emotion. Every person present understood the extraordinary nature of what had transpired. A 3-year-old child, a German shepherd, and a criminal whose plans had been fully exposed. The power of courage, memory, and instinct had shifted the balance entirely. As the courtroom prepared to continue with other witnesses, the weight of what Emma and Titan had accomplished lingered. They had survived, they had exposed the truth, and they had reminded everyone present that sometimes the smallest witnesses and the most loyal guardians could alter the course of events in ways no adult could anticipate. The defendant sat in silence, hands cuffed, eyes wide and haunted. Titan remained alert, muscles coiled, eyes unblinking. Emma's voice echoed softly, carrying a truth that no one could deny. He remembered everything. And in that moment, the courtroom and everyone in it understood fully the power of courage, instinct, and the extraordinary bond between a child and the dog who had refused to forget. The courtroom had settled into an uneasy hush, but the air was thick with anticipation. Every person present seemed to sense that the trial was on the verge of a crescendo. Emma Parker, small and determined, sat with her mother at the front, clutching her pink bunny. Titan, her silent guardian, remained a living sentinel at her side, muscles coiled, ears twitching, eyes locked on the defendant. Every second in that courtroom now felt charged, heavy with the inevitability of truth. The prosecutor, Richard Holden, cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Your Honor, we are prepared to present a final piece of evidence that confirms the defendant's intent and connects him directly to previous crimes." He held up a small folder, the edges worn, the contents containing photos, fingerprints, and a confession that had gone undiscovered until now. The room stirred, whispers rippling like a wave across the courtroom. The judge's eyes narrowed, voice firm. "Proceed, Mr. Holden." Richard opened the folder slowly, revealing a series of photographs taken at various locations, all linked to the addresses found in the defendant's notes. In each image, the same blue-tied man appeared, crouched near windows, lurking in shadows. One image in particular froze the room. It was a blurry but unmistakable shot of the defendant attempting to force entry into another home, another potential victim. Gasps erupted. The defendant's face went pale, his eyes darting wildly. He realized fully and finally that every action he had taken had been traced, documented, and now laid bare in front of the entire courtroom. Titan growled low, a rumble that echoed like distant thunder. The German shepherd's muscles tensed further, his presence a constant, living reminder of the danger the defendant had posed and the lives he had threatened. Emma's mother clutched her daughter, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Emma, you're so brave," she whispered, voice choked with emotion. Emma only looked at Titan's small hand brushing his thick fur. "He remembered everything," she said softly, her eyes wide but resolute. The dog's gaze softened briefly, a silent acknowledgement of her words before returning to the defendant, muscles taut and ready. The prosecutor continued, his voice steady, each word deliberate. "Your Honor, fingerprints found at the scene of the attempted break-ins match the defendant exactly. The blue tie, present in every image, correlates with the one he wore on the night of the break-in at the Parker home. This evidence, combined with the testimony of Emma Parker and the actions of Titan, conclusively demonstrates not only his presence at the scene, but his intent to commit further crimes." The defense attorney, John Miller, looked pale and defeated. His voice trembled as he rose. "Your Honor, this is circumstantial at best. A dog's instincts cannot be considered proof of intent." The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Order. Objection overruled. The court recognizes the unique and extraordinary circumstances in this case. The testimony of the child and the actions of the K-9 officer are admissible and central to understanding the threat posed." Emma's small voice rang out clear and unwavering. "He wanted to hurt people. Titan knew it. He remembered everything. He saved me." Titan growled again, low and deliberate, eyes fixed on the defendant. The room seemed to collectively inhale. The defendant's knuckles were white on the table, his lips trembling. He could no longer deny the evidence, the child's testimony, or the dog's memory. The trap had closed around him entirely. Richard picked up a photograph from the folder, holding it high. This image shows the defendant at the Parker home the night before the attempted break-in. Notice the scratches on his hand, the same ones Emma described. Notice the mask, the positioning near the window, the intent in his posture. Emma's recollection and Titan's instincts perfectly align with the documented evidence. The courtroom murmured in shock. The defense attorney stammered, unable to formulate a coherent argument. The defendant's face had drained of color, eyes wide and haunted. Every second of hesitation, every breath of fear, underscored the truth that he had underestimated the smallest witness and the dog who remembered everything. Emma's mother whispered softly, trembling, "You're safe now, Emma, you're safe." But Emma barely acknowledged her. Her focus remained on Titan and the defendant and the undeniable truth they had revealed together. Titan's growl deepened, resonant and commanding. The dog shifted slightly, moving closer to Emma, positioning himself between her and the defendant, a living shield. The defendant flinched, as though Titan could see into his very soul. The courtroom fell silent, every adult understanding that this was no longer just a trial of law. It was a trial of instinct, courage, and the memory of a German shepherd who refused to forget. Richard held up a small piece of paper. "Your Honor, this is a letter the defendant wrote but never sent." In it, he details intentions to revisit the Parker home and continue his criminal activities. He even references a blue tie, explicitly nodding that it is part of his plan to conceal his identity. This letter, combined with Emma's testimony and Titan's intervention, proves intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Gasps swept through the courtroom. The defense attorney's voice faltered. "Your Honor, this is unprecedented. A child's testimony corroborated by a dog and tangible evidence. I have no argument." The judge leaned back, exhaling slowly. The court recognizes the extraordinary evidence presented. The child's testimony and the actions of the K-9 officer are extraordinary, yet they have proven central to understanding the defendant's actions and intent. The evidence is overwhelming. This court will proceed accordingly. Emma, trembling but resolute, took a small step forward. He remembered the scratches. He remembered the mask. He remembered everything the man did. He kept me safe. Titan pressed his massive head gently against her shoulder, a silent affirmation. The room collectively felt the weight of that bond, child and dog, survivor and protector. Every eye in the courtroom understood the significance of what had transpired. The defendant's lips trembled as he finally spoke, voice barely audible. I didn't mean I did," he broke off, eyes darting from Titan to Emma, and for the first time fear completely overtook him. He realized fully that the law alone was not what had caught him. It was the memory, the instinct, and the courage of a child and a dog who had survived terror. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack, silencing the murmurs. The court acknowledges the bravery and testimony of Emma Parker and the K-9 officer, Titan. Their actions have prevented further harm and provided evidence critical to this case. Proceedings will continue, but let it be noted that the extraordinary bond between witness and dog has been decisive. Emma's mother wept openly, pulling her daughter close. Emma's small hand brushed Titan's fur. "He remembered everything," she whispered again. Titan nuzzled her gently, acknowledging her words, a silent hero of the day. The courtroom seemed to collectively exhale. The tension, though still present, had shifted. The extraordinary courage and memory of a child and her dog had revealed truths that no adult could have ignored. The defendant sat in stunned silence, realizing that his plans had been thwarted not only by law but by instinct, loyalty, and bravery. The prosecutor addressed the court one final time before the recess. "Your Honor, This trial has demonstrated an unprecedented but undeniable fact. The combination of human courage and K9 instinct has prevented further crime and revealed the full scope of the defendant's intent. The evidence is clear, the witness is credible, and the dog's actions corroborate everything. Titan's growl softened slightly, but he remained vigilant, aware that the threat, while contained, was real. Emma looked up at him, eyes shining. "You remembered, you saved me," she whispered. The judge nodded solemnly. Let it be noted that the bravery, clarity, and instincts demonstrated in this courtroom have profoundly impacted the proceedings. The court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances and will proceed with full consideration of the evidence. And in that moment, the courtroom understood fully. The smallest witness, the German shepherd who remembered everything, and the courage of a child had rewritten the rules of engagement, brought truth to light, and ensured that justice would not only be served, but witnessed in its most extraordinary form. The defendant's blue tie seemed insignificant now, a symbol of his failure, a testament to the power of instinct and courage. Titan remained at Emma's side, a living reminder that even the smallest witness could wield enormous strength when paired with unwavering loyalty. Emma whispered again, softly, almost to herself, "He remembered everything, and so did you." Titan responded with a gentle nuzzle, and the courtroom collectively understood the truth that had unfolded. Courage, memory, and instinct had triumphed. The courtroom was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. Weeks of testimony, evidence, and the extraordinary bravery of a 3-year-old child and a German shepherd had led to this final moment. Every person present understood the weight of what had unfolded. Emma Parker, small and determined, sat beside her mother, clutching her pink bunny. Titan, her steadfast guardian, remained alert, muscles relaxed but eyes vigilant. Every heartbeat in the room seemed to echo the gravity of the moment. The judge, solemn and steady, looked down at the defendant, whose face had turned pale and hollow with defeat. His hands were cuffed, fingers trembling. The blue tie he had once worn as a symbol of planning and concealment now seemed trivial, outmatched by courage, instinct, and truth. "Mr. Henderson," the judge began, his voice resonant, "this court has reviewed all evidence, heard all testimony, and considered the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the case. The actions of the witness, Emma Parker, and the K9 officer, Titan, have been decisive in exposing your criminal intent and preventing further harm." The defendant's lips quivered. He attempted to speak, but no words emerged. The weight of his deeds, the damning evidence, and the courage of the child and dog had left him silent and cornered. The judge continued, voice steady. "It is clear beyond any reasonable doubt that you planned to commit acts of violence, invaded the Parker home, and posed a serious threat to multiple individuals. The court recognizes the extraordinary evidence provided by the child and the K9 officer, and the bravery displayed in preventing further harm." Emma's mother clutched her daughter tightly. Tears streamed down her face, a mixture of relief, pride, and lingering fear. "You're safe now, Emma," she whispered, voice trembling. Emma only nodded, her eyes fixed on Titan, who had remained by her side through every tense moment. Richard Holden, the prosecutor, stepped forward. "Your Honor, the defendant's actions, coupled with the evidence recovered, and the testimony of Emma Parker and Titan, demand a verdict that reflects the severity and premeditation of his crimes. The defendant should be held fully accountable to ensure the safety of the community and to honor the bravery of those who prevented further harm." The courtroom remained tense, every adult aware of the extraordinary nature of this trial. Emma, small and trembling, whispered to Titan, "You remembered everything and were safe now." Titan pressed his massive head against her shoulder, silent but powerful, a living testament to protection, memory, and loyalty. The judge leaned back slightly, exhaling. In light of the evidence, the testimony, and the actions taken to prevent further crime, the court finds the defendant guilty on all counts: burglary, attempted assault, and premeditated intent to harm. Gasps of shock and relief rippled through the courtroom. The defendant's blue tie seemed to pale further, a symbol of failure and exposure. Officers led him from the courtroom, his face drained of color, and the reality of justice closing in was undeniable. Emma's mother sobbed softly, holding her daughter tightly. "You were amazing," she whispered, pressing her lips to Emma's hair. Emma clutched her bunny and looked up at Titan, whose vigilant eyes softened only slightly in acknowledgement. The German Shepherd's presence had been a constant reassurance and shield, and now that the danger was contained, the bond between child and dog was undeniable. Outside the courtroom, reporters jostled for position, cameras flashing, eager to capture the story of courage, instinct, and truth. Emma's small figure, hand brushing Titan's thick fur, became a symbol of survival and bravery. The narrative was extraordinary. A 3-year-old child and a police dog had faced terror and emerged victorious, exposing a man whose intentions had been sinister and calculated. The prosecutor, speaking quietly to Emma and her mother, said, "You both displayed extraordinary courage. Titan's instincts were incredible, but your bravery, Emma, was the heart of this case. You helped prevent something terrible." Emma's small fingers traced Titan's fur. "He remembered everything," she said softly. The courtroom slowly emptied, leaving only the Parker family and a few remaining officials. Emma's mother knelt down to embrace her daughter fully. "You were so brave," she whispered, tears falling freely. Emma's small face pressed into her mother's shoulder, but her eyes never left Titan, whose eyes gleamed with quiet pride and vigilance. Weeks later, the sentencing hearing was held. The judge, stern but acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances, handed down a sentence that reflected both justice and recognition of the bravery displayed. The defendant would serve multiple years in prison, with no possibility of early release, ensuring that the threat he posed would never endanger anyone again. Emma, now recognized publicly for her courage, was awarded a special commendation for bravery. Titan, too, received recognition, a K9 award for valor and instinct, marking him as a hero alongside the child he had protected. The community celebrated the bond between Emma and Titan, understanding that courage and loyalty could manifest in the smallest bodies and the keenest instincts. On the day they returned home, Emma skipped lightly into her house, clutching her bunny. Titan followed closely, head low, eyes watchful but relaxed. Claire, her mother, knelt at the doorway, embracing her daughter fully. "We're safe now," she whispered, "thanks to you and Titan." Emma smiled at the dog, small fingers brushing his fur. "He remembered everything," she said softly. Titan nuzzled her gently, as if acknowledging her words. Together, they had survived a terrifying ordeal, confronted danger head-on, and emerged not only unharmed but victorious. The Parker home, once a place of fear and anxiety, had become a sanctuary once again. Titan patrolled the rooms with quiet vigilance, Emma's laughter echoing in the background. The events of the trial, though public and extraordinary, had reinforced a truth the family had always known. Courage came in many forms, sometimes small, sometimes furry, and always fiercely protective. At night, Emma lay in bed, her pink bunny tucked under her arm. Titan curled at the foot of the bed, alert but calm. The shadows that had once haunted their lives had receded. Emma whispered softly into the quiet room, "He remembered everything, and we're safe now." Titan's deep, steady breathing was the only response, a living reminder of the events that had unfolded and the courage that had protected her. In the days that followed, the story of Emma and Titan spread across the nation. News outlets highlighted the incredible bond between a child and her K9 protector. Social media buzzed with awe at the bravery of the 3-year-old and the instincts of a German Shepherd whose memory had saved a life. Communities recognized that heroism did not always come from adults in power or trained officers alone. It could come from the smallest witness, the silent guardian, and the extraordinary courage that arises when survival demands it. Emma's mother watched her daughter play in the yard, Titan ever present by her side. The trauma of the past had left marks, but the family had emerged stronger, bound together by trust, bravery, and an unbreakable bond. The blue tie that had once symbolized danger was now just a memory, overshadowed by the real heroes, Emma Parker and Titan, the dog who remembered everything. Years later, Emma would recall the events of that trial with clarity and courage. Titan's presence had taught her the meaning of loyalty, bravery, and instinctive protection. The courtroom drama had been resolved, justice served, but the bond formed in those tense moments would last a lifetime. Titan remained a guardian, a friend, and a symbol of the extraordinary power that could arise when courage meets unwavering loyalty. And in the quiet moments, Emma would whisper, as she had that night in the courtroom, "He remembered everything, and he saved me." Titan would nuzzle her in response, a hero without words, whose memory and instinct had shaped the course of justice and protected a life that was too precious to lose. The courtroom, the evidence, the terror, it all receded into history, but the lesson remained vivid. Courage knows no age and loyalty knows no bounds. A 3-year-old child and a German shepherd had confronted darkness, and together they had ensured that light prevailed.